Welcome to the Action Network podcast. This is our best bets episode for the 2025 PGA Championship, teeing off this week at Quail Hollow Club in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm your host, Mike Calabrese, and today I'm joined by a pair of brilliant minds in the golf betting space. First up, returning to the show, a two-time Fantasy Sports Writer Association Golf Writer of the Year, a senior PGA analyst at Rotoballer, and co-host of the new Draftcast, King of the Draft. You can find him online at Tee Off Sports. Welcome back to the show, Spencer Aguiar.
Thanks for having me, Michael. I look forward to doing this today.
Now we're going to consult your model, hopefully define the biggest edges that you're seeing this week at Quail Hollow. But before we do, let's also intro my colleague from Roto Grinders, a golf expert and one of the most talented data modelers in the game. You can follow him over on X at KMurDFS. It's Kyle Murray. How you doing, buddy?
Mike, you're trying to make me blush. You would see it more if I wasn't so sunburned, but I do appreciate the kind words. Looking forward to talking a fun major championship event. Excited to talk some golf with you guys.
Now, before we tee off here, guys, there's plenty of people that listen to the show that may be casual golf bettors. So if you could do a bit of table setting in terms of what makes the PGA Championship so special, both from just a viewing perspective, but also from a bet modeling perspective. Let's start with you, Spencer.
Yeah, this is a very interesting major because I can't recall a time that we have seen a board this top heavy. We always have one or two choices that are near the top in that sub 12-1 sort of range. But if you look at the market and where the market has been moving, it's been extremely aggressive when it comes to Scotty Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, and Bryson DeChambeau. If you believe the winner comes from outside of that group and we're talking about value in a betting tournament, I could probably write you a novel, Michael, about all the reasons why this is a great betting tournament. With that, you get pricing that should be deemed too aggressive at the top. Value is going to get enhanced further down the board. There's also this natural answer that most slates will rarely be anywhere near proper when you have two names that are going to be 5-1 in Scotty and Rory, and then the next in Bryson that's become this sub 10-1 choice. As everybody knows who bets all the time, books always naturally skew in favor of the favorites because that's more of where the square money ends up landing. If enhancement happens elsewhere, that's typically a very good thing. Now, all of that sounds good on paper, but I don't know that it's that cut and dry this week. Like, I stand by the fact that there has to be reduced prices at the top because we do have too much hold percentage that's happening there. But the way that this board laid out for me, and I'm interested to see where Kyle lands on this as we move forward, this was an extremely top-heavy production output inside of my model. When we look at Quail Hollow, and I'll keep this very short, when we looked when it played here in 2017 for the PGA Championship, you got this extremely fiery, fast Bermuda putting surface. It's still going to have some speed to it. I think one of the narratives in the space that's been a little bit overblown, in my opinion, is, and we'll talk about it as the show moves on, it is wet and it's rainy there. There is a sub-air system. That's one of the things that most people have not been talking about, but I think the bigger issue of what comes into play when I looked at this tournament is you have overseeding on the grass this go around compared to that last major. So when you throw that into the mix, historical data tells me inside of my model, whether you look at the Wells Fargo Championship, which is what hosts, Quail Hollow hosts that tournament every single year, or you look at these majors, President's Cup, all of these big events that have been played there, there's usually about a 45% strokes gained output when you have a flat stick in hand. If you have this overseeded Bermuda that's going to give you this much purer surface, I think you might be able to ramp that up a little bit. And then the other problem that comes into play that's even more of that is we can talk about the sub-air system and how that's going to help a little bit with the wet conditions, but you're still not going to be able to avoid Friday and Saturday where there's rain in the forecast. So, carry distance is always the number one answer for me at Quail Hollow. So club head speed, carry distance, those answers just so heavily push in the favor of the three favorites of this tournament. And it was really hard for me from a win equity standpoint for my model. And we can discuss what fair pricing is for each one of them. But I did have each one of them as sub 10-1 being proper. So, that's kind of my long-winded 2-cent take to this. But it's an interesting betting board because it's either do you trust the top or do you want to take value elsewhere?
Question to get you involved here, Kyle. This is obviously the second major of the year. The first one being the Masters. It's the same course every single year. There's small modifications, from year to year, but for the most part, you know exactly what you're getting. You know which player's game kind of molds properly to the course, gives them a leg up. Whereas the PGA, obviously, it's a different course every single year. So, in terms of your modeling, do you start there in terms of course analysis, or do you look at historical performance or momentum by the particular golfers in this field?
Yeah, I do think this year, particularly for the PGA Championship, it is a little bit of a unique spin on things just because we have a course that has hosted the PGA Championship before in 2017, and then obviously it hosts the Wells Fargo every single year. I do think the course is obviously going to play a little bit different. They're going to set it up differently. As Spencer mentioned, they add a little bit of length to it as well. I think the wet conditions also play a factor in things here, but it does at least provide us a little bit more of a head start in terms of the course analysis compared to going to a place with a fresh start or very little data and sometimes even no data for some of these majors. So I do think that is a unique spin on this particular event. When looking at some of the data from Quail Hollow at Wells Fargo compared to that 2017 event, obviously a very small sample, only one tournament, but obviously they were able to make the missed fairway penalty a little bit higher, a little bit greater, obviously growing out the rough and whatnot, and obviously set up things throughout the course. But I do think at least having a little bit of data and a little bit of knowledge as to how guys play this course and how well they play it, at least gives us a little bit of a head start there for this particular event. I love the point that Spencer made about the cluster up at the top with these three top prices in Rory, Scotty, and Bryson. I do think he made a great point right off the rip, saying that if you believe that you can find a winner outside of those three, it opens up tremendous value because obviously a lot of this money is gravitating to those top three guys, and rightfully so, right? All these guys are playing extremely well. They're clearly, amongst the top golfers that we've seen over the last decade or so, and their form is all, pretty impenetrable when you look at their current resume coming into this event. However, whenever you have a case like this, and this has been the case outside of major events as well, you look at, oddball tournaments like, the Mexico Open, where you have one golfer who is, dominating such a hold on the market and such a low number in the betting markets, it just opens up value throughout the rest of the field. So I do think that brings a very interesting dynamic. Me personally, the way my model sees it is obviously it does like these top three guys as, the clear-cut favorites for the winner to come from this group. But for me, I'm going to be looking for some value, a little bit outside, longer for longer numbers, in the market here for some players in that top 10 or so.
You both mentioned the three golfer cluster at the top. Let's expand that a bit to, let's call it the top 10 of the world rankings right now in terms of golfers you like to potentially win this tournament. You have Rory fresh off his career Grand Slam, I should say. Does he play better with that monkey off his back, or is that pressure bringing out the best in him? That's a question we're going to find out this week. And then you have Scotty Scheffler, currently the number one golfer in the world, but he's never played Quail Hollow on his own ball, although he did play in the President's Cup here in 2022. He didn't play all that well. He went 0-3-1, gaining just a half point for the U.S. team in their victory over the international squad. So, Spencer, I'll kick it to you first in terms of those top golfers. As I said, let's expand that three-player pod to the top 10 golfers in the world. Anyone there from a value perspective that you expect to win this tournament?
When we saw this board open up, this has kind of been my blueprint to this, is where you have Scotty and Rory at, we'll call it 5-1, just to give a very basic number here. Bryson was the one name that had drifted out a little bit. He was 16-1 last week. He dropped to 14-1. He opened up Monday at 11-1. I thought any of those totals were extremely bettable. I had Rory and Scotty more in that 6.5, 7.5-1 sort of range. I had Bryson at 8-1. So it's a very even split for the most part between those three big names. And there was one name that drifted a little bit further than the rest of them. And now the market has corrected itself. There's square and sharp money probably alike that bet Bryson when this last week and it opened up this week. The one name I do want to throw out outside of Bryson, though, that I realize that if you look at what he's done this year, it's been a slow start, sat out a handful of months due to injury. We're still talking about the defending champion, though, at Xander Schauffele, and that number's been as high as 25-1 at some books. Like I said, very slow start to the season, and we haven't seen him post a top 5 finish in 7 tournaments, but a lot of the metrics that I care about for this venue are starting to trend in that direction for him of what we were seeing last year. 4 top 18 finishes in a row, a putter last week that finally showed some life again. He gained plus 3.6 at the Truist Championship. That's the highest total output that we've seen from him since August. So if you look at his history at Quail Hollow, back-to-back second place finishes, and then you look at this profile from him that shows him inside my model to be third place grade for me with proximity outside of 200 yards. That's a bucket and a range there that generates almost 41% of second shots. I think you do have a really elite skill set from him, and this is a name to where he is the forgotten star of this group. If you don't have this slow start and injury at the beginning of the year, you're probably looking at this number right into like just above that single digit range, and you probably would have 4 superstar golfers in the minds of the public. But I really like that Xander price at 25-1.
Kyle, let's start with Rory and Scotty both going off at plus 450. Do you have any interest in playing them at that price point? Maybe perhaps looking at them to be a first round leader or some kind of other exotic or head to head. Any interest in Rory or Scotty here?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that I have no interest in them. I guess the one thing that I've been doing over the past couple of years as someone who does play a lot of golf DFS as well is I'll try to get my money in on those guys in the DFS streets and, look for more value in the betting markets. I know that's not, super, great advice for a primarily betting show, but that's personally how I do it. And I typically have a rule where I don't, very often bet, guys that are, lower than 10-1 in golf terms. I just think that, my model doesn't typically project guys to be in those kinds of ranges. And that leads to me finding more value throughout the, the back end of the, that top tier or even mid range. But obviously both of these guys are incredible. I have no problem with anybody wanting to bet these guys and thinking that they are the favorites to win. I do think that I have no problem looping in Bryson right there with the likes of Rory and Scotty, because I do think that distance and particularly ball striking is going to be very, very important here, especially with the wet conditions. I think that's actually going to help a guy like Bryson. Spencer mentioned the carry numbers there, but I also think it's going to help with his approach play in terms of just being able to hold greens easier. And I think that's going to go a long way in terms of, giving him more scoring chances. So I have no problem in, looping in Bryson with those top two. If I had to rank those top three, I would probably be ranking them Rory, Scotty, and then Bryson. But I think all of these guys are, more than deserving of those numbers, just probably not going to be numbers I'm chasing here. And I think if you were able to get a Bryson number early on, like Spencer mentioned, at that 14 or even 16-1, I think those are incredible values. But for me, I'm probably not going to be chasing here at 9-1, or I think currently 9.5-1 for Bryson, or the 5-1 for Rory and Scotty.
Kyle, let me pick your brain on some mid-tier and long shot golfers that you'd like to overperform in this field. Let's start with Ludwig Oberg. He's tremendous off the tee. Would that be enough to entice you at 25-1? And let me mention one other golfer as well, perhaps a Sepp Straka, who's lethal inside of 100 yards and second in strokes gained when approaching the green. He's going off at a tantalizing 70-1. Either of those, Oberg or Straka, are they on your card in any way, shape, or form?
I did take a good hard look at both these guys. Obviously, Straka coming off the win, and then Oberg always worth a look here, especially in these spots where distance is very important. Obviously, he ranks in the top 10 in terms of driving distance. He's in the top 24 in terms of birdie or better numbers. So I think he has the ability to go out here and compete in an event like this. I like guys in these two price tiers a little bit more. So for Ludwig, like you mentioned, 25-1. I have a Xander ticket out there. I prefer him he's at 22-1 right now for FanDuel, over on FanDuel. All the things that Spencer mentioned, I kind of second there for Xander. And a lot of people talk about this being Rory's course. He's dominated it in years past, but over the last 5 years, it's actually Xander who has the best strokes gained numbers here at Quail Hollow in that 5-year time frame, ranking first in total strokes gained, first in strokes gained tee to green, fifth off the tee, second in approach and ball striking. So Xander looks great here. I do think he's trending back from that injury as well with that top 10 finish at the Masters last month. So I like him in that price range over Ludwig. And then for Sepp Straka, you mentioned 70-1. I like Corey Connors at that 70-1 number. So again, no problem with Straka. He does look, awfully strong as well. But just I like this number here for Connors. It's at 70-1 over on FanDuel right now, but other books are offering it as low as 50-1. So I do think there's some value on that 70-1 number. You always got to wonder, does Corey Connors have the upside to go out there and finish a tournament, a big tournament like this, I suppose. But I do think that 70-1 value is going to offer, a nice number there. And in my opinion, when looking at his numbers, I have no doubt that he'll at least be in the mix. Looking at his strokes gained numbers over the last 6 months, 13th in total strokes gained, 9th in ball striking, 14th and off the tee, and 11th in strokes gained tee to green. So I love the numbers here for Corey Connors. Again, win equity is a little bit of a tough number, so also like betting that top 10 or top 20 number for Connors, but at 7-1, definitely think there's some value there in the mid-range for Corey Connors.
You can absolutely do huge damage in the mid-tier and long-range space, whether it's to win outright, top tens, head-to-heads. Who are you targeting in this price range, Spencer?
I really like the call from Corey Connors from Kyle there. I think he's one of the prime examples of what we were talking about early in this show of a golfer where the top of the board gets, they're all sub 10-1, and then you're going to get drift elsewhere. Connors, for me, inside of my model, top 5 at both strokes gained total on long courses and strokes gained total at hard scoring courses. Also a top 10 projected player for me in weighted proximity for this course. So I think there's a lot to like with him. The name I'm going to throw out on this show, and this is as boom or bust as you're going to get. If you look at the recent form with this, it's bottom of the barrel. If you do bet him outright, this is one of those situations you could wake up on Thursday, look at the bottom of the board and see that the outright ticket's dead. Like, I want to warn everybody about that. But when I make outright bets, I'm always looking for win equity over the safety return on it. I like Minwoo Lee at 100-1. I talked a little bit about the recent poor form that he's had. He won in Houston. That was a bet that I had him at. One of the reasons why I took him there was because of the same carry distance answer and the putting acumen that he brings into these events. So it's going to take the right outcome for him to be able to find success. But when we were trying to find, or I was trying to find golfers inside of my model that possess that high ceiling sort of an output in that triple digit zone there, Minwoo checked a lot of boxes. It's just you're going to need the perfect outcome from him to be able to beat the high-end guys. So for me, this is one of those things that if I'm betting him, I'm doing it as to win top 5, top 10, and I'm avoiding any of the safer markets. Like, I have no interest in him as a matchup. I have no interest with him to make a cut. It is the boom or bust outlook that I'm looking for him there.
Do you ever watch sports and find yourself wishing that there was a way to get into the game? Well, with Underdog, there's finally a way to make picks on sports without leaving the house. The game is in your hands. To play, choose whether a player will go higher or lower on a specific stat, like touchdowns, strikeouts, points scored, and more. They've got all your favorite leagues, teams, and stars to choose from. You can create entries with all baseball picks or mix and match across sports. You can play it with as little as $1, and if you get everything right, you can win up to 1,000 times your money. So you can turn that $1 into $1,000 just with your sports knowledge. I've been playing Underdog to spice up those afternoon games in the bigs. Special thanks to Dansby Swanson for helping my bankroll with 4 dingers this month already. And that's the beauty of Underdog. You can ride the hot hand in any sport, from the NBA and NHL playoffs to Major League Baseball every day of the week. Underdog has you covered. Download the Underdog app and sign up now using promo code ACTIONNETWORK to unlock a special offer for up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. Join in on the fun when you sign up with promo code ACTIONNETWORK. Claim your special offer and get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly upon your first deposit. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. All right, guys, I'm sure there's a few more plays on your card. So if there's any additional bets you want to add, whether it's top 10, top 5s, players to miss the cut. I know that you've talked a lot about Xander Schauffele, how great he's been playing and the potential value he has at 22-1. He's also 7-2 to miss the cut. Any interesting plays like that on your card? I'll go to you first, Kyle.
I don't have too many make or miss the cut plays out there yet, but I do have a couple of additional outrights that I'll mention real quick. I also bet John Rahm at 18-1, and then Joaquin Niemann and Hideki Matsuyama as well. So those are a couple other outrights that I have, and then some long shot guys that I'm looking at in the top 20 market. Don't mind taking sprinkles in the outright if you wanted to throw a couple bucks on it, but a couple long shots that I have for top 20s or top 10. I also like Minwoo Lee for a top 10 at plus 650, so I love that call. Like Spencer mentioned, very boomer bust, but again, I'm loving the kind of the archetype of guys who have tons of distance, but might struggle typically with the iron play, or at least competing in an elite way with the iron play, because I do think that distance is going to, help even out that weakness, or that maybe that lack of strength there. And then obviously being able to hold greens a little bit easier, I think is going to go a long way with the wet conditions there. So minimally top 10 plus 650. I like that one. Keith Mitchell at a top 20, another very boomer bust guy. I mean, talk about a guy who can easily be, 12 over by the eighth hole if things go poorly, and then you wake up thinking he's at the very bottom of the scoreboard. Another guy just like that, top 20 plus 350, like that number for Mitchell. Again, lots of distance, lots of variance here with him, but for these long shot guys, I actually like to lean into that variance a little bit. I like Keegan for a top 20 at plus 400, and then finally Davis Thompson for a top 20 also at plus 400. Again, Thompson, just one of those guys with the distance, and his stroke gain putting does not look good, but he is one of those guys who can definitely get hot with the flat stick. And again, I do think his ball striking is trending in a good direction with his irons, and we know that he has the off the tee play to sort of compete with a lot of these top end drivers of the golf ball. So like all those names for long shot guys to potentially have their name in the mix there come Sunday.
All right, Kyle has signed his scorecard. He's in the clubhouse. Spencer, you're walking up 18. Take us home.
I will say this: Kyle and I are in lockstep with a lot of the answers that we've given on this show. So, I mean, that's an interesting output, that things to consider there. I'll give you one head-to-head bet that I really like, and then I'll give you an additional player outside of the Keith Mitchells of the world that Kyle just talked about. I don't think you have win equity with this answer. This is probably more of the top 40 at 2-1. I've seen some interesting numbers on this golfer to make the cut, but Thorbjorn Olesen was a name for me that was very surprisingly within the top 30 of my win equity model. He lacked any of the truly high-end marks that I would want to see for him to actually be able to win this at that 300 to plus one range, but that is a name that I will try to get exposure to this week. And then the matchup that I will give out on here is I took Bud Cauley minus 120 over Lucas Glover. It's a really weird profile from Glover in my model, because a lot of what I try to find, and I've done a lot of Action Network shows that if you've listened to me in the past, one of the things that that I try to find is miscut equity. I'm always trying to find a golfer that I'm looking to oppose more even than what I'm looking to back. And Glover does have some safety in the profile. Top approach player in this tournament, top 40 around the green. Those two metrics in particular, when you're looking at upside versus safety, it's the approach play and the around the green metrics that usually give you more of a potential to make the cut. When you're looking for upside to actually win this, it comes down to carry distance and your ability to make putts on this. And that is where I worry about Glover's overall profile here. He ranked an extremely paltry 152nd out of 156 golfers for me in that pure carry distance answer when you look at a wet setting. Then he was also outside of 100th when looking into courses that demanded bogey avoidance from a longer distance. None of that necessarily means that he's going to miss the weekend, because he does have safety built into the profile to some extent. But Cauley was a golfer for me that top 25 in safety, much higher than the market seemed to be on Cauley. So I like this as a spot of a golfer that I was looking to back in Cauley. There are some negative marks if we're looking from just pure carry distance, but I think this is a nice spot that if it goes for 4 days, I like where we stand with it. And the goal is to avoid one of those situations where Glover gets through to the weekend and Cauley doesn't, because I think if we can get 4 days out of this, I like where we stand with Bud Cauley.
That's a wrap on our Best Bets episode here for the 2025 PGA Championship at Quail Hollow. Special thanks to Spencer and Kyle for their analysis. Our next episode will feature Sean Zerillo and Mike Conti covering the action at the Preakness Stakes. So if you're interested in the ponies, make sure to update and refresh your podcast feed so you don't miss that as soon as it drops. And a special thanks to our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Best of luck to all your bets, and we'll see you back here next time on the Action Network podcast.